Hey there, winners. Drew James back here with a Winning Play podcast. Week 2 NFL coming up. I am here with producer Rob. We've got Kendall out on sick leave still, breaking down week 1 and week 2 of the NFL season. Rob, how'd it go? How'd you feel about week 1? What was your main takeaway?
My main takeaway is, boy, am I glad football's back. I had the three screens going up. It was football all day Sunday, especially for me. So, I'm just so excited that it's back and that we can, talk week in and week out about everything going on.
So, unfortunately, looking at our records, looking at our picks from last week, you murdered me. You went 14-2. Pretty freaking impressive. And I think one of those two you were fencing about. I went 7-9. I would like to reassure my fans we'll do better. But uh, what was your proudest pick of the week? What'd you have the most fun saying? Oh, I called that.
For obvious reasons, it was definitely the Pittsburgh over the
Oh,
Falcons.
I thought
It
you were going
was
to
for
say the
sure that.
Bucks.
Well, I did want to throw that one in there. I actually couldn't believe at the time that you picked Washington over us, but
There's a bit of a hater going on there where I knew you're on the show. I was really just trying to piss you off a little bit. Um, But yeah, I'm still amazed that you're sitting here at 14-2. That's a lot of ground to make up. How about of the two you lost? Which ones did you miss? You missed.
I missed the New England Cincinnati game. I
There you go.
think everybody
Everybody
kind of
missed the
missed
New
that
England
one.
Cincinnati game for sure.
And then I missed the Vegas Chargers game. And my takeaway from that is I should have never bet against Harbaugh. I love that guy, and he's such a
I
good
think I
coach.
talked you into that one, so I'll take the blame for that loss as well. I made a good case for the Raiders that did not pan out. But quite impressive. I'm gonna try and catch you. It might take a couple weeks now with a 7 game head start. Um, well, let's go. Let's talk about who impressed you most week 1. Which teams do you come out of week 1 going, okay, they're legit. We should be scared of them. We should be betting on them. What teams were your favorites after week 1?
I mean, most recently it's got to be San Francisco. They came out ready. Didn't even have Christian McCaffrey, but steamrolled the Jets. Made their defense, which I have being one of the best defenses overall season long, made them look pedestrian pretty much on all fronts. And then I have some other teams. I got to go with my guys, Tampa Bay. Our offense came out like I hoped and knew they would. And then the Miami Dolphins in the second half. The first half it was a little rusty, like you expect in week 1, but they were gritty in the second half. Yeah, go Dolphins. They were gritty in the second half, and even I think Mike McDaniel came out and said, this team wouldn't have won that game last year. So, good for them.
I agree with you on that, especially, I mean, as a Dolphins fan, loving to see the Dolphins have a come from behind victory. I think that the Jalen Ramsey forced fumble as ATM was about to go into the end zone changed the whole game. But also, you're talking
Huge.
about a team where at least four starting players on your team were detained by police or in handcuffs an hour beforehand. Explains a little bit coming out flat in the first half, and then to be able to shut out the Jaguars in the second half and come back for the win. Obviously, as a Dolphins fan, quite happy. And then San
Oh, I
Francisco were very
forgot one
impressive.
more. I forgot one more impressive team, and that would be my fantasy football team. I'm just Ken, hence the shirt over yours this week.
Oh, can
I
we cut
did.
this
We did
part?
do a
I
good
think we
job
should cut
this
this
week.
part. Yeah, yeah. Rob and I squared off in our keeper league. Wasn't really that close. I did pretty well. Had 5 fantasy leagues this week. Went three and
Yeah, you
two.
did.
Two of those, I scored the most points in the league. But you shellacked in the same way as you did on the picks. Shellacked me in fantasy as well. So all we're not worthy of Rob, who has, which is my fantasy team name. But yeah, you're riding high here after week 1. I'd say I thought all those were impressive. I thought Houston was pretty impressive.
Right.
That game against the Colts, I had picked the Colts to win, and I actually do think the Colts showed up pretty well and still couldn't take it from Houston. I mean, your Bucks, I thought, looked the part. Now, as we will keep going on through the rest of this podcast, it's week one. So let's not overreact. We haven't seen all of these teams play any other teams except for one. And the Bucks got to play the Commanders, who may just have a completely inept team, but they came out and looked like the best team in that division for at least week one. Uh, let's move on or at least for now, let's move into fantasy. Biggest winners of the week. Who are your guys where it's like, okay, if you had him, they won you a game?
So I went more with like archetypes with like running themes. And I think the biggest winners, at least of week one, were any of the dual threat quarterbacks. Any of those guys, they all performed. They all showed up, rookie or not. And then I have to say the veteran running backs. Half of the ones that are in split backfields, we don't know if it's a high upside young guy or the older vets. He also had Joe Mixon as a vet running back come in and smash in week one. So really, it's the running quarterbacks for me and the veteran running backs. Zeke Elliott. We'll be talking about these guys a little bit later.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of your guys, like obviously Saquon Barkley comes out. Saquon looks like he's going to be a league winner, number one running back candidate this year. He had
Amazing.
3 touchdowns this week. I think he had 3 touchdowns last season for the Giants. Like Saquon is about to blow the doors off, and you've also got guys like J.K. Dobbins in San Diego. I think he's a winner, a huge winner right now. He's not even rostered in some leagues. Had 110 yards, like 20 carries. Looks to be the main benefactor of Harbaugh coming in. I would say you've got some guys like Garrett Wilson who showed out and have showed, hey, I'm going to keep going for the rest of the year. But I think you're right. The veteran running backs, even guys like Rachaad White, who didn't look so great and their job might be in jeopardy, at least still kept their roles in week one. There weren't a lot of underdog running back comes in and has taken the job that we didn't know about. Kyren Williams came in. Obviously, he was a huge workhorse last year. Until a week ago, everybody was saying Kyren Williams going to do it again. And then a week ago, they announced he might return punts. And everybody started looking at Blake Corum. Like in a hasty, oh gosh, should we be concerned? Kyren Williams comes out, gets like 95% of the snaps for the Rams in week one. So I do think, like you said, the veteran running backs are somebody who came through, and that's a group that came through and showed like we're here, we're staying. You're either right to bet on us or wrong to invest too much in the backups there. I don't know if this lasts week to week, but at least for week one, I would agree. I would say on the other side, all the tight ends are losers. Every tight end there was not one tight end in the NFL this weekend who blew the doors off. I think the top tight end scored 11 fantasy points, possibly. I have to look up that stat. But and if you invested highly in a Kelsey, Kittle, Trey McBride, you're probably waking up disappointed this week. If you waited and waited and waited, you could have still got a guy for 3 points, so you're losing 7 points 9 rounds later. So that'll be my biggest disappointment, will be the tight end position. What about you?
Yeah, I had that as well as a group, and then to go along with the biggest winners. I think the biggest losers were, like I said a minute ago, some of these high upside young running backs that everyone likes for juice. The Chase Browns, the Tajay Spears, even, which hurts my heart. And then the Rico Dowdles, even. Those guys, we're all excited about their pass catching ability and maybe the juice they bring, but it was all these vet guys that really took over. The Zeke over the goal line, he's not going away. Zach Moss, even when the Bengals were behind, Chase really wasn't getting much usage. You already mentioned that Kyren.
Zach Moss wasn't doing anything either, but yeah, that Bengals offense.
But usage wise, he was. He got the
right.
main
He's
usage
getting
and
carries,
snaps.
but you can get 20 carries for 20 yards. Isn't helping my team.
I think we just underestimated New England's defense, man. Gerard Mayo really got them ready to play. I was impressed with him as a coach in week one, considering what we all thought of that roster.
I would say, like watching the footage, I don't think Burrow can throw the ball. I think his wrist is still screwed up. Even the clip. I know it went viral of him trying to pick up a water bottle and he couldn't even pick up the water bottle as he's sitting there flexing his wrist. Joe Burrow is not the same quarterback he was 2 years ago, at least not right now. I know he always loses the first game. He's always hurt the first game, so maybe he will improve, maybe he'll heal, but he looked like he couldn't grip a football, which then eliminates the passing game, which doesn't help the running game either.
I would say
But
that kind of falls under the week one overreactions for me personally. I was looking back at it, and he's 1-4 in opening games, and actually like 1-7 to start seasons.
he
Like
is.
for week twos as
He
well.
is, and he's
So,
been hurt. Like I said, almost every year he's hurt that first game. But the way he looked hurt in week one this year doesn't make me feel great about him going forward into the season. And I know you're classifying this as an overreaction, but a lot of those years when the Bengals start losing, they keep losing. They did have the one year where they lost at first and turned it around and made the Super Bowl. But the other 3 years where they've started off losing, they've kept losing. So I would say, if anything, the Bengals look to me like the Bengals of last year, where Joe Burrow's going to be hurt, this team's going to underperform. Uh, I don't know if they're going to make the playoffs. Who won in the AFC North this week? Was it? Did anyone win? The Steelers won.
the Steelers were the big
The
winners. They
Steelers are
showed
the
out
only
with
team
the
in the
nasty
AFC
defense.
North to pull out a win this year or this week. But the Bengals, I mean, everything rides on Joe Burrow, and man, he didn't look healthy or good. Hopefully that gets better. But you mentioned overreactions. Let's talk about more over. What are the big week one overreactions that you're seeing? And I'll agree or disagree or throw out some more.
But we already talked about the Bengals. I think we're on different sides of that. I think as long as everyone's healthy, I think they do figure it out. It was a big deal losing Brian Callahan and then, T's out and Jamar didn't get a lot of practice and stuff. I think they figure it out. And the other one, it just happened last night, the Jets. I mean, the Jets offense looked rusty and stagnant. And then the defense obviously got, pretty handled by 49ers. Now, this is, the 49ers. They are a perennial Super Bowl team right now. So I think the Jets are another one where they're just going to take some time. Brees usage looked good, and he looked good overall
See,
in both the.
that's another one I disagree with you on. My opinion for a while has been that Aaron Rodgers wasn't really that great his last 2 years in Green Bay, and he had a great team, but he kind of looked like he was over the hill. And then he comes to the Jets. I didn't think he was going to be better on the Jets last year than he was on the Packers. And he missed a year, so I don't trust that he was going to be better a year after tearing his Achilles than he was on the Packers. And he looked pretty awful. And yes, they are playing the 49ers, who are a good team, but that good team was missing the best player in the league, Christian McCaffrey. They offensive tackle and one wide receiver didn't even start practicing until Thursday. Like the fact that you can't even compete in a game against a team whose four best players didn't practice in the offseason and is missing their best player on their whole team is not a good sign for the Jets. There's not one player on the Jets that has been out. There's not one that's been missing. And you have to start wondering. Robert Saleh has an 18-38 record as a head coach. Nathaniel Hackett, as an offensive coordinator, has consistently looked like one of the worst offensive coordinators in the league and wouldn't, in my opinion, even have a job as an offensive coordinator if Aaron Rodgers had not insisted that he be hired. I think the
We
Jets
can
are
agree
in
there
deep
for sure.
trouble. I think the Jets are in deep trouble. They are the only, speaking of divisions, they are the only team in the AFC East that lost this week. So they're already a game back of every other team in that division playing a non-division game. And yes, every team they play is not going to be the 49ers, but Aaron Rodgers didn't complete a single pass to the right side of the field.
Yeah, I
That's a
saw that
problem.
stat. That was pretty wild. That was pretty wild.
That's a problem. I would say if I'm a Jets fan, I'd panic. Part of this is bias because I hate the Jets and want to see the Jets fans panic. But I'd be panic if I was a Jets fan.
Well, Jets fans, if
Um,
you're listening, at least one of us is saying don't panic. Season long, I still think you guys can get it together. I still believe in that defense a lot as well, despite how they looked. I think at all three levels they have studs. So I think it's just a week one.
I personally, again, to refute that, I just if your defense just gave up 140 rushing yards to an undrafted free agent who didn't know he was starting until Friday or Sunday, depending who you ask, yeah, I wouldn't be too confident in my defense right now.
I mean, the only thing I would say to that is that San Francisco has a history of that, making any running back look great. So, I'm not really too concerned. That's another overreaction I have. If people want to think about Jordan Mason maybe taking some snap share away from Christian McCaffrey, we saw Elijah Mitchell in the past kind of get extreme efficiency in his usage, and that really didn't matter when Christian McCaffrey came back healthy. So, that game
I
overall
wouldn't
was
be as worried of Mason taking McCaffrey's snap share as much as with how good Jordan Mason looks. I think the 49ers are going to keep McCaffrey sidelined as long as they need to, or until they're 100% confident in his return. And I talked about this, I think, episode 1 with Kendall. My big bust of the year was Christian McCaffrey. No running back who has had that, who has led the league in carries, has been a top 12 fantasy running back in the last 20 years. He had all this before, and this was before the cap injury came to light. All the signs pointed to there's no way he makes it through the season. Now he's already missed week 1, looking like he's going to miss week 2. And when you have Mason looking that good, I don't think they'll rush him back. I don't think McCaffrey's dead, and when he's playing, I don't know that Mason's eating into his touch share. But I would say I'm worried about how long is he going to be on the bench, and is this a recurring injury? Like when I hear Achilles tendonitis, he didn't practice all summer and now isn't playing. Running backs of that age that have Achilles problems don't usually last. And as you said, the Niners have a big history of finding the undrafted free agent running back, and now he's the guy. I'm not saying they're benching McCaffrey, but as someone who did draft McCaffrey in at least one league, I'm definitely worried.
Yeah, I just see him. We'll get to waiver wire stuff later, but I definitely see Mason more of a short term than a long term play. But he looked great. I mean, there's no in real life. You're watching the game. He looked amazing. So,
What are your thoughts
um,
on the Falcons? Panic or no panic?
what? Well, as you know, I called them. I've been kind of chagrined by the national narrative that they would come right out the gate and be amazing and blow teams away and things like that. I mean, we're talking about a team that has all new coaching, 36-year-old quarterback coming off an injury with very little reps in training camp and all this stuff like that. And everyone just really thought that they would just bring it all together just like that. Um, I've always seen them as a second half of the year team. I think they're going to drop a lot of games in this first half, and for them, it's going to be a matter of what kind of run can they go on to finish the season. My Bucks, luckily, I was happy looking at the schedule that we played them twice in the first half of the season. So I was happy about that, knowing that they'd come out rusty. The only thing I'd say to fantasy managers is obviously it's concerning. Even Pitts that got in the end zone, that was great, but I think he only had maybe three targets, things like that. So I would say don't panic, but definitely be cautious and look. Drake London owners, it is something to monitor moving forward and see what he can do once the team pulls itself together a little bit more than what they showed this last weekend.
I would say my panic level on the Falcons is at full until Michael Penix can take over at quarterback. Watching the footage, it does not look like Kirk Cousins can plant his foot. He, on multiple throws, shrugs off his right foot, throws the ball short. I would trust nothing until I can see that he can throw the ball. And it does not
I'm
look
just
like he can
laughing
throw the
because
ball.
you're gonna have the Bengals, the Jets, and the Falcons fans running amok after this.
Good. I mean, the Bengals fans are used to it. The Falcons fans, sorry about that, and the Jets fans find a better team. But the Falcons, I mean, did they look better than they looked last year? I mean, Bijan, if you have Bijan in fantasy, got a lot, a much higher share, a much higher route share, a much higher target share, a much higher carry share. Kyle Pitts, I feel like led all fantasy tight ends this week.
Mm,
or except for
I,
Isaiah Likely. Or okay, I think he was fourth. I think it was Brock Bowers, Moreau, and Likely were the top three in reverse order,
sure.
and then Kyle Pitts came right after. But I mean, Kyle Pitts with 11 fantasy points is still top four. So at least, and I believe he was out there for 97% of snaps. So Kyle Pitts, I'm at least a little relieved of like, okay, it's not going to be last year, the last 2 years where they just don't give him the ball at all. Drake London, non-factor. But again, I think right now the problem is Kirk Cousins. And if you've got a quarterback that can't stand on 2 feet and throw the ball, I'd be worried about how your offense is going to do going forward.
Right.
Uh, and again, these are week one overreactions. I would say a couple to not overreact to. I wouldn't worry about Amon-Ra St. Brown in Detroit. He's going to get his catches. He's going to get his yards. Some of these people we're looking at, hey, week one, they might have had their greatest game of the year. Some of these guys might be, hey, week one, they had their worst game of the year. Amon-Ra not scoring doesn't concern me. Jameson Williams does impress me. What about you? What are some that you think let's not get overly concerned about their dismal performance in week one?
I would say the Seattle passing offense. So, DK and JSN, DK is their wide receiver one, and JSN I think was a pretty popular, like quote unquote sleeper this year. He's a guy that I was high on going in. He had such amazing college production, and last year he really got waylaid by that wrist injury. It's tough for receivers in their rookie year anyway, and then to get waylaid at the beginning and not get the reps to kind of come to grow with the team, it's hard. And then by the end of the year, he was getting a lot of manufactured touches and routes. So I was high on him coming in, and with DK getting the Surtain shadow coverage, I kind of figured he'd have a bad game or at least a low volume game. But JSN was definitely a disappointment, and but moving forward, I see them improving. I see them coming together. I love Ryan Grubbs, and he came in. He's always been an offensive line or a running game coordinator. So I see them starting with Ken Walker, big year for him. I see, and then coming out. But of the three receivers on that Seattle team, Tyler Lockett looked the best. I think he had 6 or 7 receptions for 60 to 70 yards. I mean,
I
he
think
was the only one kind of
he
showing
was
up.
for PFF, or I think he was the fourth rated wide receiver in the league this week.
Yeah,
But yeah,
yeah, he
for a guy
definitely
who was
showed up, and he
questionable
was
to
like
even
kind of the
play,
only one.
yeah, I'd agree with you on all that. Well, here we are. We've been through week one, and now we've had so many questions and guys that have popped up, guys we're worrying about. So now we're through week one. Let's start talking about running backs. We've got certain backfields that we were very unclear on going into the week. We're getting a lot more clarity now. Let's start with the Rams backfield. That's Kyron's backfield, right? We were all worried. Everybody said, oh, Kyron's returning punts. They just drafted Blake Corum. It's not even close. Kyron was the bell cow last year. I think he got 93% of snaps this week. Kyron's the guy, right?
Yeah, I do a short content videos for the podcast called Keeping It Real, and one of those was about the Kyron punt return. I told everyone to relax. It's still going to be Kyron's game, and I don't think many of us saw Ronnie Rivers taking RB2 snaps, but he was the guy behind Kyron. So yeah, the Blake Corum wave is definitely died down after week one.
Yeah, there's definitely a question over who's going to be the backup, but Kyron's is that guy. And then you look at like the Lions, both running backs, and you're starting them in fantasy. Either one could score 25 a week, would be my opinion. How about you?
Yeah, if I'm, both are good, and they're gonna be good all season long. I think the biggest winner of that is actually if I'm a David Montgomery owner, where I got him, seeing that the Lions still at their base, at their core, want to be a power run team. As soon as overtime happened, it was all Montgomery, and if they can dominate that line of scrimmage and run down your throat with David Montgomery, that's where they're really gonna rest their laurels on. And I think we've seen that. Gibbs is the high efficiency, explosive guy with less touches, but wow, if I'm a Montgomery owner, I'm feeling pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, and I feel like the whole game plan of overtime for them was just have Montgomery run people over. And it seemed to work pretty well as they drove down. I would like to, maybe this is a separate segment, how have we not changed the overtime rules? We saw it in the Super Bowl how exciting it is to give each team a possession.
Right.
Having the Lions come straight down and score a touchdown and the game is over, I don't think gave the Rams the fair shake that they would be in for. What about over in? Let's cover a couple teams real quick that the argument is over. In Tennessee, Tony Pollard's the guy. Tajay Spears is still going to get third down chances. He's still going to get some catches, but Tony Pollard's who you want. In Cincinnati, Moss is the guy. Chase Brown didn't really show up at all, but it's pretty clear Zach Moss is the guy they're rolling with. In Dallas, uh, there's a lot of us, including me, that took Rico Dowdle. Hope Zeke is they have paid Zeke too much over the years. I would contend they've stuck by him too much. They let him go, brought him back, and they are back on the Zeke train. And he actually looked pretty good. I couldn't
Right.
even complain at them for
He
using
did.
him. But I think that's over. But there's one that is interesting to me is Tampa Bay. Your Bucks. Rashad White still getting a lot of play, but didn't really look that great from a football perspective. And Bucky Irving looks pretty solid. How long do you think Bucky can take that job? Do you think that's a split going forward? What are your thoughts on that?
Bucky's amazing, man. I loved him coming out of the draft when we got him. At the end of the day, season long, I just want to let people know I'm so close to this team, and I still believe that season long, no matter what, Rashad's going to stay as a rock solid RB2. He still had like 6 for 67 on passing. He's an amazing pass catching back, and he is so good yards after the catch in space. He's always going to have that skill set. The other thing I will say is Washington's front seven under Dan Quinn, their secondary will be something that you should target all year long on your receivers and stuff. But their
I
front
very much
seven under Dan Quinn is way underrated and so good. Their interior defensive line is so good. They have Frankie Louvu and Bobby Wagner. I mean, that run defense will give people problems as they develop more of a pass rush. And then the thing I'll say is that Rashad, when you look at just base surface stats, Bucky had higher efficiency running the ball. I will say a lot of those runs came at the end. It was 95 degrees there. It ended up being further than what the score looks like. And at the end he was getting there, and there were a couple um, plays that were actually more about Liam Cohen playing beautiful chess against DC of Washington and Dan Quinn, because some of those plays were less about Bucky, as amazing as he is, were less about Bucky and more that it was the perfect run call for the pressure package that Washington brought. So I'm really not as worried as I think some people are about Rashad White losing overall. I do think Bucky's absolutely earned running snaps and things like that, but as far as like people, I've seen people kind of say that Rashad is just going to be moved to the third down back. I just don't see it happening that way. Liam doesn't want to telegraph his plays like that either. So moving forward, both these guys I think are going to start to have value. I really do think that Bucky long term is a pretty good pickup, regardless of Rashad's usage.
All right. Well, what about let's move over to the wide receiver side. We've got a few different wide receiver situations that were in question. I think the biggest one, and it's still maybe not settled, would be Houston.
Right.
Stephon Diggs, 2 touchdowns, but I think 9 total air yards of his targets or of his catches. Nico Collins and Tank Dell also both had big games. So which one do you want, or who do you trust?
I mean, of those three, absolutely, this is easy for me. I'm trusting Nico the most. I think he's so good, and he is definitely, of the three, I think you're going to look season long, you're going to see he's the most consistent. It's a three-headed monster, and that's great for real life, but in fantasy, that can tend to, it can tend to give you boom or bust weeks when you have these prolific three-headed monster receivers. So I'm definitely picking Nico.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I think honestly, I'd probably go Nico and then Tank and then Diggs. I think Diggs is a guy that we know from his past history is going to be upset if he's not getting the ball and getting his touches. And this kind of looked like a game where they fed him a couple touchdowns. I don't know that that's going to continue. And the other two look like better receivers. Yeah, I'm with you though. I'd go Nico would be my trustworthiest one. Diggs is going to catch some touchdowns. They're all probably playable, but that's the order I'd put them in. Uh, let's look at Seattle. You talked about Jackson Smith and Jigba. Kind of a disappointment for those of us who thought he was a big sleeper this year. DK Metcalf again, locked down by Patrick Surtain a bit, but Tyler Lockett looked really good. Are you confident in any of those guys?
So I'm totally willing to be wrong here. Lockett did look like the best one of those three last week, but I still have DK going out and having a great year. I think this is just a case of week one and offense trying to figure it out. And I still got DK and JSN coming through and pulling out for that. But Lockett deserves to be talked about, and I'm willing to be wrong about him being third in the pecking order halfway through the season.
I think Lockett is third in the pecking order. I think you're right. I think he's still a valuable fantasy guy. I think JSN is going to have bounce back weeks. I think it's going to be his low point. And I think Patrick Surtain may be the best corner in football. So having him on DK made me not high on DK for this week, anyways. But I think DK is still gonna come through. So I'd agree with you there. What about let's see. Let's talk about the Rams. One of my big predictions for this year. I thought Puka was going to outscore, or I thought Cooper Kupp was going to outscore Puka Nacua. I thought he would return to his number one status. For the first quarter and a half or so, it looked that way. And then Puka went down, and he is now on IR. So I mean, Cooper Kupp looks like he has a chance to be a wide receiver one this year. Does that hang on? Is there another guy you see coming in? Do you think Puka comes back and takes over too much share? What are your thoughts there?
Man, that was special. Seeing him get 21 targets like 2021, it was awesome. I don't want to poo-poo Cooper Kupp because I love that he's come back strong like that. I think that while Puka's gone, he's a smash start, wide receiver one for sure. Long term though, I definitely see Puka coming back and taking plenty of shares of snaps. And this offense employs and uses their third and fourth wide receivers so much. DeMarcus is such a good play, and he was actually a good pickup before Puka's injury, but now I mean he's another
Oh
smash
yeah.
start. And Tyler Johnson, the Bucks drafted him and he made some gritty catches in the playoff run for the Super Bowl, and he's always been a tough body possession guy, but man, he looked great on that big play that he broke open and ran forward. So he's kind of a sneaky. If people have already kind of scooped DeMarcus before the game last week, Tyler's another one that's kind of a sneaky waiver wire. We'll get into that later. There's a lot of depth there in the waiver wire for week one, but so I see Cooper Kupp being a great receiver all year long. When Puka comes back, I don't see wide receiver one potential. I don't think the 21 targets obviously is sustainable. And I don't think they want to use him that way because despite all the talk, we don't want to see him get injured like other years past. So, love Cooper, happy for him, and in this short term while Puka's gone, I mean, look out. He's gonna get a lot of work.
I mean, again, I've had Cooper as a wide receiver one before Puka got hurt. I think Puka being hurt obviously is going to bump him up, but I think, again, even watching that team before Puka got hurt, I think Cooper is the number one option here. Uh, Again, obviously, he's gone in all fantasy leagues, but I think if you've got him, keep him. If you don't have him, try to get him. I think Cooper Kupp is going to be a huge standout this year. Let's move over though. What about the Packers? Another wide receiving crew that had 3, 4 guys that you didn't know which way would go better. What's your take after watching them in week one?
This one's short and simple. Until Jordan Love gets back, the only guy that I would even consider starting is Jaden Reed. Put him in the flex. He's the guy that gets manufactured touches, the end arounds. While Malik Willis is the quarterback, you simply can't start anybody. You can't start Watson, you can't start Dobbs or Wicks. So
I
Jaden
would,
Reed in the
I would,
flex.
I'd agree with you to a point. Now, they came out today. They are not even ruling him out for this week, so I don't feel like Jordan Love is going to be gone that long. I think it's going to be 2 weeks maybe. But I wouldn't be now. Like you said, I would agree with you. I wouldn't be trotting any of them out. Well, Malik Willis is a quarterback, but Romeo Dobbs, I think, is still a guy to have. Again, we're trying not to overreact to week one. I think he only had 4 catches, had some good yards, maybe a touchdown. But Dobbs is going to be there. I think he's going to catch at least 5, 6 passes a game. I think he's going to be a red zone target. I think week 1 was kind of the downside of Dobbs, and he still put up a few, but I wouldn't be getting rid of Dobbs yet. Jaden Reed looks like the guy to have. Christian Watson looks like he's got frying pan hands, but they're still going to throw to him. But like you said, I wouldn't start any of them until Jordan Love is back. Absolutely.
I think Jaden I would put in the flex if I had him. I don't have him in any leagues this year, but I would put him in the flex. I do think they're gonna put so much more of the burden on him because they know Malik Willis can't pass. So they're gonna take the guy they already had in the game plan to get manufactured touches, and I think he'll get even more. He's the only guy I would start, but I would be happy actually to start him in the flex. I'm not really worried. And wow, he was one of my standouts for week 1 for sure. What a stud that guy is. He looks like I think I texted you guys
like
that he looked like I think I texted you guys he looked like Debo in Curtis Samuel's body,
I like that.
But he looked great.
So moving forward, looking at week 2 here, let's start talking about some of these big injury situations. I want to start with the Thursday night game. My Dolphins are playing the Bills. Here it is Tuesday. As we record this, Mostert and HN both listed as would not have practiced if the practice were today, which doesn't mean a ton. What are your takes on the Dolphins running back situation, especially going into Thursday night, but also looking season long?
Yeah, I think we were talking about this a little earlier. I think maybe we see slightly different things. This is a Thursday night game, so it's going to be following reports, and it's hard to know what's going on. They did kind of like the hypothetical practices, and both Devon and Raheem were out. I just for some reason I have this feeling that Mike is playing a little gamemanship here. Devon's usage where they really fulfilled their promises of the offseason, talking about him being in the slot and getting a lot of passes and stuff like that. He's a huge part of the game plan in both the run and the pass. So for whatever reason, I feel like Raheem is more likely to miss, and Devon, I think they're kind of like babying a little bit with the ankle, and they're going to still put him out there. And then if either of them misses or if both of them misses, you're looking at Jeff Wilson and Jalen Wright. So Jeff was the active player because of special teams at the time before they knew that anyone would get injured, and Jalen was a healthy scratch. But if one of those guys misses and special teams isn't really like the necessary quality to get a start, man, I would love to see Jalen Wright go out there. He looked so explosive in the preseason, and I personally would be excited to see him get some run.
Yeah, I agree on Jalen Wright. I have him in, I think, 3 of my 5 fantasy leagues. I was pumped watching him preseason, and I was worried about Mostert and HN's injury history. I will say, I have my 2 big takes from watching game 1 with the Dolphins. Don't sleep on Raheem Mostert. He got hurt. It's a chest injury, but I do think he's still going to be a huge factor in that running game. And a lot, like if you look at week 1, it's like, oh, it's HN. Well, Mostert got hurt first, and then it was all HN. But then the other guy is Jeff Wilson. Jeff Wilson came in the second half of that Jags game and led 2 Dolphins drives down the field, and he was grabbing 10, 12 yards per touch and eating up the Jaguars defense. This is a guy from San Francisco that Mike McDaniels brought over. He knows him. Everybody's kind of ignored it because we drafted Jalen Wright. But I do think there's a decent chance Mostert and HN don't play Thursday, in which case, if you need a guy to run out there, Jeff Wilson is rostered in, I think, 1% of fantasy leagues. He will get probably at least 12 carries and 4 or 5 targets.
He brought some juice for sure.
I think Jalen Wright is the guy that we both think he could be. I think Jeff Wilson is probably the lowest owned fantasy guy that has a chance to really make a difference in week 2. That being said, season long, I'd take Jalen Wright all day. Like I said, I have him in 3 out of 4 leagues. So I like both of those guys. Baby. And I think I would bet on HN and Mostert missing Thursday on a short week with their injury history. If you're the Dolphins, why risk it? You've got 2 other running backs. Let's go out and play. I would bet neither of them play. In which case, I would think you could slot Wilson or Wright into your flex, and you're going to see some points. Let's moving on. Other big injuries, CMC. We don't have to address it too much. As long as CMC is not playing, Mason is a top 5 running back in fantasy.
He's
Spend
great.
all your fab budget on him, especially if you have Christian McCaffrey. Pick him up if you can. Once McCaffrey comes back, that's CMC's job. But Mason, in the meantime, you've got to have. Puka Nakua, another guy, and he's now on the IR. Like you said, DeMarcus could fill in there pretty well, but Puka, you can't let him go. You're going to sit him, you're going to play him when he comes back. David Njoku, another one on the Browns, who actually, again, no tight ends looked great this week, but he was looking all right and then got injured. Is he one that you're just dropping completely? Is there a replacement there, or do you think that's just kind of a situation you're staying away from?
Some of this comes down to like roster buildup, like team build, what you need and stuff. I'd be okay with someone putting Njoku in the IR spot and holding on to him, depending on some of their needs, or depending on if they even have use for that IR spot for anybody else. But it's tough. And Deshaun Watson, like I thought he would, looked awful. So that offense in general. Now Amari Cooper dropped that touchdown. He would have had a pretty solid day if he had caught that. It's an uncharacteristic drop by him. So I wouldn't fade all the Browns guys, but Njoku this year is a little fragile because Deshaun does not look good, and I don't see an end changing in sight. Maybe Jameis, and they can get that going long term, but Njoku's short-term first half of the season right now don't look great. A high ankle sprain. You don't know if it's 4 to 6 or what he looks like afterwards or how serious it is. And then a guy in line like that is with Jake Ferguson too. So they have Schoonmaker on Dallas behind him, second-round pick. He'll probably be a great pickup. That offense depends on that tight end spot. Dak loves his tight end in the red zone especially. So both those guys, I had no problem putting on IR. I would definitely look to, if you're an Njoku or Ferguson owner, if you want to blow fab for a true season long prospect, Isaiah Likely, and then if you want to save a little bit and go for like a smart buy, maybe go Schoonmaker. There's actually another waiver wire tight end we'll get to later that I like that I think is really sneaky.
Well, let's go. Let's go into that thing. Let's go into, here we go, week 2. Who are your fantasy waiver wire pickups? Who is your top tier? Spend your budget on these guys. Some of them might be for just this week. Some might be season long. But give me your waiver wire go-tos for week 2.
For QB, there were two pocket passer quarterbacks that I would go to that I think are going to be, we always love the dual threat floor. It's always going to be a better pick in fantasy to have a dual threat quarterback. But if you have to go pocket passer, both Baker Mayfield and Matt Stafford looked great, and I think those offenses are going to keep rolling. I'm big on Baker this year.
Well, surprise.
Right, but I think week 1 didn't prove me wrong. I don't want to say prove me right, but it definitely didn't prove me wrong. And I see a big year with high passing touchdowns on that team, and Matt Stafford as well. Obviously, Sean McVay, and it's not a coincidence. Liam Cohen comes from Sean McVay, so Jaden, if not rostered.
On the quarterback side, Matthew Stafford excites me a lot more. A guy who, there were only 2 300-yard passers this week. Matthew Stafford's one of them. Didn't have the touchdowns. Baker does look good. Baker doesn't run at all. I don't think Baker's going to throw 4 touchdowns every week. He's playing maybe the worst pass defense in the NFL in the Commanders. I would assume that this is, I'd bet money this is going to be the biggest fantasy week Baker has all season. He's not going to eclipse
Baker had 21
points.
Rushing yards, but he's a scrambler. He's a gritty guy.
He had 3 rushes. But again, touchdowns regress, especially when you're not playing the Commanders. I do think Baker's going to have a good year football-wise. Fantasy-wise, I don't see him scoring 4 touchdowns every week. Stafford, sure. I do see him throwing for 300 yards every week. Touchdowns, I think, might increase. But I think with that offense, and in pretty much every offense Stafford has played in, he puts up 300 yards a week. So I think there's more room. I think Stafford has room to perform better than he did this week. week one's going to be Baker's high water point for the whole season. Not to say that Baker's still not on my list. If I'm taking quarterbacks, like you said, Stafford and Baker of the ones that are available. If you can't get a Jaden Daniels, if Justin Fields is not out there, Stafford and Baker would probably be my two. But as far as like, regardless of position, who would you say would be like your number one waiver wire pickups of the week?
I mean, regardless of position's a little bit hard, but I mean, it's got to be Isaiah Likely, right? For long term, season long. Jordan Mason in the short term is probably my favorite, but overall, it's got to be Likely just because there's there's not really like a Puka or a Kyron out of this year's week one. Isaiah Likely, some of these tight ends went down, and especially because so many tight ends, kind of flopped the bed this week. I see Isaiah Likely as, it just depends on your roster construction, but I see him as worth a lot of fab because he really could come in and even be a flex play if they continue to run this 12 personnel so heavy. Now, people pointed that out and pointed out Mark Andrews, like car accident, injuries, and limited reps, but I genuinely think they're going to run 12 personnel more than any other team in the league this year anyway. So I like Likely.
I think Likely. I've been big on him last year. Watching the tape of the Chiefs game and looking at the stats of every game the Ravens have played against the Chiefs, Mark Andrews has never had a good game. And in every single route Mark Andrews ran during that game, he was bracketed. Two guys on Mark Andrews. I don't think that's going to happen all year. Mark Andrews owners, I would say, relax. He's going to be all right. They're not going to play the Chiefs defense every week. And every time they play the Chiefs' main objective has been to take Mark Andrews away. That being said, Isaiah Likely has looked really good for about a year and a half now. He's not going away. He is going to get targets. He's going to get catches. He's going to get touchdowns. So I would also have him, as much as I'm saying Mark Andrews owners, it's okay. Yeah, I'd have Isaiah Likely my top 3 or 4 fantasy pick. I would say my number one, if you don't have him, he is rostered in probably 65-70% of leagues right now. But if he's not on a roster, J.K. Dobbins should be the number one waiver claim. Now, in a lot of leagues he's taken, but if in your league he's not, he looked just, for some reason this guy gets injured every year, and for some reason the next year he always comes back looking even better than he did before the injury. He looked great. They gave him the ball a ton. As long as he's walking, J.K. Dobbins is already a threat to be a top 10 running back this season. So he'd be my number one. Jordan Mason, like you said, a short-term guy. If you're a McCaffrey owner, you gotta have him. And if you're anybody else who wants some production until McCaffrey comes back, he's probably number 2. I'd have Likely in that conversation. And then I would have Bucky Irving up there, who I think is primed to take. It's more of a season-long play, but I do think he's going to take more and more shine off of Rashad as the season goes on. Especially,
we definitely have a little bit of disagreements there. And the J.K. Dobbins, I would for sure want him as a waiver wire pickup for sure. In leagues, absolutely pick him up. I am a little milder about him as season-long prospect. He had a great first game, but if you only look at the stats versus watching, I do take some more things from watching the snaps and watching him run, and his running gait and getting caught from behind and running out of steam and stuff. He is essentially dragging a dead leg behind him on some of these big runs he busted up. So if he doesn't have both a 41-yard gain and a 62-yard gain, it looks a little pedestrian. And so I just want to see it moving.
It's pretty hard to have a 41 and a 62-yard gain.
Absolutely, and I'm not poo-pooing picking him up on the waiver wire. He is a good waiver wire pickup, especially considering the options. I am just saying I'm a little milder, and I want to see it more as the weeks go on.
I would say let's go on. A couple other ones I'm looking at. Guy I watched the whole game this week, who I think is a big sleeper this year, Tank Bigsby on Jacksonville. Every time he got the ball, he looked so much better than Travis Etienne. Travis Etienne was running into his blockers the entire game, couldn't gain a yard, and then the one good run he had, he fumbled going into the end zone. Tank Bigsby looks like a guy ready to take over that job. I'm not saying he will, but I think he's going to keep getting 12, 15 carries every week. And the way he's running looks like he's going to do something with him. I would take Tank Bixby as a running back. And then wide receiver wise, we talked about Demarcus Robinson a bit. I do feel like while Pook is out, he's a big pickup. But I really like Greg Dortch on Arizona. I know it was not their greatest game as far as Marvin Harrison Jr. is concerned or Trey McBride. Arizona's still putting up points and they're still going to be behind all year. Greg Dortch on the porch, man, I'm there for it. I'm putting him in my
he's definitely
waiver
on the
claims this
all
week.
he's definitely on the all unsexy name team for sure. I think that's part of the reason why we keep kind of neglecting him. You know, last year and it seems like he shows over and over and over again that he can produce when given an opportunity. So Dortch is in there. You know, Marvin Harrison, he's clearly going to go through some more rookie struggles than I think everyone expected. They all heaped all this praise on him, and you know, he struggled. He had a drop, and then he
Well,
kind of like
also on the game winning play, he was 30 yards open, standing in the end zone, and Kyron didn't see him. So it could
yeah,
have
but
gone
Kyron
bad,
had already
for
kind
sure.
of Kyron had already
But
kind of
it's
left the
his
pocket
first
to the
game.
left,
He
and
could.
yeah.
I agree. He struggled, but I don't think Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be a flop. I think, but as you
No,
agreeing with
he's
you,
just going to go through
there
rookie
are
up
going to
and
be rookie
downs.
struggles.
And then the third
Uh,
guy I think that I would take is, you know, this is not an exciting offense, but I think there's a lot of possibility here as they grow a little bit more, and that's Wan'Dale Robinson. You know, he had 12 targets in that game, and I don't really know who outside of Malik Neighbors who they have, and he's going to be working the middle of the field as a slot and intermediate, and gonna be Daniel Jones's best friend if he can't always get it to Malik the stud. So I like Wandale. You know, obviously there's going to be a
there, I guess I don't trust. I don't know if I want to be Daniel Jones's best friend right now. He looks pretty. Daniel Jones looks like maybe the worst contract in football outside of Deshaun Watson. I feel like you're right. He had 12 targets. Those might go to Malik Neighbors next week. I just don't trust the quality of these targets. And I do think Demarcus Robinson might be one that's like, we look back at the end of the year and go, oh, well, week one, he played well. And then we didn't hear from him again.
Well, he
Uh,
finished the year last year incredibly well. So, I mean, he had like 13, 14, 12, 13, 14, like in touchdowns every game almost to finish the year. So, DeMarcus was for sure one of those guys where if he's not even picked up already, because in a lot of leagues he would be picked up already as the third wide receiver in that Sean McVay offense, he's for sure the top wide receiver waiver wire pickup easily.
well, one more guy I want to talk about too, Justice Hill on Baltimore. Only, I think, two or three carries, but got, yeah, I think, 8 targets and 6 catches. The Ravens, really, I'd be much more worried if I was a Derrick Henry fan because it's very clear that Derrick Henry, is not going to be out there on passing downs or third downs. Justice Hill seems like he's at least a lock for 4 or 5 catches a game, plus the upside of if Derrick Henry goes down or misses any time, then it's only Justice Hill. I feel like that's a guy that could be producing season long.
Yeah, and John Harbaugh came out and said, look, we didn't get Derrick Henry to get 30 carries a game. He's
And all
just a
the Derrick Henry
piece.
owners loaded their guns. Yeah.
Yeah, he's just a piece of the offense, and you know I kind of have the Ravens as a season-long disappointment. I don't think they're going to show quite the regular season dominance that they showed last year, where they're going to be ahead by so much all the time. That offensive line was very concerning to me, and that was part of the reason Mark Andrews didn't get a lot going on because they needed him to block so much. So Justice Hill, I see he clearly is their third down back and clearly a big part of their passing game. They're going to be throwing to the backs a lot more than we've really ever seen them because that was kind of a down thing of the Ravens' offense the last couple of years in fantasy was they didn't really throw to their backs, but clearly they love Justice in the passing game.
All right. Well, let's move off of fantasy for a minute. Let's go through. We've only got a few minutes left here, but let's go through these games for next week. Let's get a couple quick takes and predictions. Starting Thursday night, my boys, the Dolphins, hosting the Bills. Who you got?
So I'm going to go ahead. It's still hot. It's still Florida. I'm still going to take Miami, but I do think this is a dangerous game for Miami. I really do, especially if Devon Achan can't go, even more than Raheem. I think Raheem's skill set and place in that offense can be replaced by Jeff and Jalen, but Devon, they got him throwing slots all over the field and all that stuff. So I got Miami, but a close one.
I am going to take the Bills here. Breaks my heart, and I hope
Oh,
I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I'm going to take the Bills. They have owned us for the last 4 or 5 years.
oh wow.
Hasn't mattered. Now, usually we play them at the end. I have all kinds of reasons I'm hoping my Fins can pull it out. But with the Dolphins favored by 3, especially, I'm taking those points if I'm a better. But I'm taking the Bills until the Dolphins show that they can do it, especially if they might be missing Achane and Mostert. Uh, I, again, praying I'm wrong, but I'm going to go to the Bills. Let's move on to Sunday. What about the Niners versus the Vikings? Vikings coming off a
The
huge
Niners
win.
looked Yeah, the Niners look so good. It's -6 on
So
the
did the
line. I would take the
Vikings.
points. I know, but I
I
would
mean, the
take
Vikings had the
the
biggest win
points.
of all week one.
Right. Yeah. I
You're going
gotta
to
go
take the
Niners in
Niners
that
and the 6. I agree with you.
and the
I'm
points.
making a
Yeah.
devil's advocate case, but I'm totally with you on that. I'm taking the
Yeah.
Niners all
Yeah. Yeah.
day. Tampa Bay versus Detroit. Now, this is one of my betting picks of the week. I'm going to take Tampa Bay to keep it closer than 7. I do think I'm going to take Detroit to win this game in Detroit, but the 7-point line seems like a lot. I think Tampa Bay is actually even better than they were last year. And I think Detroit came out the other night and looked pretty beatable versus the Rams. But really, if it weren't for the coin toss, very well might have lost that game. I think Tampa Bay keeps this close. I'm going to take Detroit in the game, but Tampa with the points.
I was so ready to come out rah rah and have my guys get their revenge game and beat them outright, but we lost 3 corners, Antoine
Oof.
Winfield Jr., and we're down 2 of our defensive tackles, one starting and one the first rotation. So our defense, we're going to be pulling out preseason bodies and guys that we let go for practice squad, and then we're bringing back. And some of these guys are going to be starting. We had Christian Izien play a role. He hasn't played since high school, so this game worries me a lot more than it would have. I actually, at full health, would have picked Tampa Bay outright, but I have Detroit. I'm going to actually take Detroit and the points on this one. I think that this game will be within the points all the way until the end. And then I think maybe to seal it, Detroit will kick a field goal to put it out of reach and then just get the 7. I like both of these I like both of the over unders 51.5. I like both these offenses to just smash. I really think Tampa Bay's offense is gonna surprise and show people what we can do, and Detroit's offense, we know what it is.
Jets -4 at the Titans. Neither team looked good week one. Aaron Rodgers looks old. Tennessee. My favorite quote of the week was Tennessee's coach saying that if they had just punted on first down, they might have beat the Bears. And it actually is pretty true watching that
It's an
game.
awesome
Who
quote.
are you taking here?
To me, it's a get right game for the Jets, especially their defense against a struggling Tennessee offense until they get it together. So I got the Jets, and I'm happy to take the points here. I think they win by more than 4. So
I'm going to go ahead and do an upset pick here. I'm going to take Tennessee. The Jets' defense, I think, is overrated. They've got Hassan Reddick still not playing. I mean, for defense, it's supposed to be great. The 49ers with a backup running back and 3 players who just started practicing this week just went right through them like sliced butter. And that offense didn't look any better than last year. I think Robert Saleh is going to be on the hot seat after Tennessee outright beats the Jets, let alone the points. I think Tennessee takes it at home, and we start hearing murmurs about who the new coach is going to be in New York. What about we got the Chargers going on the road to Carolina -6.5? I think that's kind of low. I think at this point I'm just going to bet anybody versus Carolina and the points. What about you?
yeah, it's a pretty safe bet. I mean, 6.5 in a typical fashion is a lot of points to take, but in this case, Carolina, it just shows there's a gap between the worst team in the league, Carolina, and the second worst team, which you could argue is a couple teams. So I think any of those smash Carolina as well. So Carolina's got a lot going on. I'm taking Chargers at the very least outright.
I'm with you. How about New England, Seattle? Seattle favored by 3.5. It's in New England. Can either of these teams score points?
I love this line -3.5. I think Seattle easily gets this. I think this is look, New England's defense. has always been nasty, and under Mayo, they really came out to play, and I think they're going to be a tough defense for everybody. But um, Seattle, I just think they had a wake up call last week, and I think they get more things right this time. I'm taking Seattle in the points.
I'll go with you on that. I think New England caught a Bengals team with a quarterback who can't hold a football right now, with a lot of guys out and it just rejoining the team. And like you said, their defense is going to be solid, but I do look for Seattle to wake up from that wake up call. So I'll go with you. Moving on to the Colts versus the Packers. Colts favored in Green Bay. Jordan Love probably out this week. Who do you like?
Smash Indiana at -3.5.
I love
Versus
that.
Malik Willis, smash them.
I
This is probably the easiest bet line of the week for me.
I would agree on you on both counts. I think, honestly, I thought the Colts looked better last week than a lot of people might realize. We're a couple fingertip passes away from Adonai Mitchell having 3 extra touchdowns. Their receivers are getting open. That one throw Anthony Richardson made just looked ridiculous. And Malik Willis may be the worst backup quarterback in all of pro football. Now starting for the Packers. I don't trust that at all. I'd take the Colts and the points all day. We go on to Cleveland versus Jacksonville. Jacksonville -3 at home. Both teams coming off a loss last week. Deshaun Watson's father died right before that game. I think you got to give Cleveland a little slack in that sense. And I do think they're playing the Cowboys, which could be a Super Bowl contender in the NFC this year. So I think Cleveland's getting hated on a bit. Jacksonville looked fine for the first half in Miami and then did nothing at all. I know last week you said, which Jacksonville team do we trust from last year? The first half season Jacksonville team looked great, or the second half team that looked awful? Week one,
They showed
Jacksonville
both.
showed us both teams.
They showed them
So,
both, yeah.
what's your take? Who comes out this week?
Ugh, this is just an ugly bet that I don't want anything to do with. I didn't know about Deshaun's father, R.I.P., but um, you
He
know,
died, I think, Friday. So there is
okay.
some leeway to give.
Okay, well, respect to the father, not the son. But this is such an ugly game. I'm gonna go ahead and take Jacksonville, but I'm not happy about it. I don't know what either of these teams are supposed to be, and I think they're gonna have to put a couple weeks together to show us who they actually are.
I'm gonna agree with you again. I'm gonna go Jacksonville. I'm gonna take the points. Deshaun Watson with a new sexual assault allegation out this week as well. That can't help chemistry. I don't know if you saw the clip of the Cleveland player down this week, and Deshaun offers him a hand to help him up, and the guy shoves him away. It doesn't seem like the Browns players like Deshaun Watson. If I'm a Browns executive, I'm looking really hard at bringing Jameis back in and trying to salvage this season before it gets out of hand. But I'm gonna go with you on the Jaguars there.
Yeah, the city of
Now, I
Cleveland
think
is freaking out. The city of Cleveland's freaking out about Baker Mayfield versus Deshaun right now. The radio
I
stations are going
think
nuts.
I think Baker Mayfield turning into a better quarterback than Deshaun Watson is maybe the most Cleveland thing that could possibly happen. I, I just, it's kind of what they deserve, and it's also just not even fair. Like to be a
Right.
suffering Browns fan for this long, and to watch a guy that took you to your first playoff win, and then you get rid of him unceremoniously, and now here he is looking like an actual quarterback, and you're stuck in the dregs of no man's land is tough. Staying in that division, Baltimore with the biggest line of the week, hosting the Raiders, 9.5 point spread. Do you think the Ravens can cover? Do you think the Ravens win? What do you take?
I think the Ravens win outright, but 9.5's a lot for me, and I still think the Raiders are capable of being a tough, gritty defense and a tough, gritty team. So I'm gonna take Ravens, but not the points. I guess I'll take the Raiders for the points at -9.5.
Honestly, again, right with you. I think the Ravens are getting a lot of credit for looking really good, and they haven't looked really good yet. They scored 20 points against Kansas City. I know Kansas City's got a great defense, but the Raiders' defense isn't to be laughed at. So, yeah, I'd take the Raiders to keep it close. What about New Orleans, Dallas? We got Dallas given 6.5 points in Dallas.
As much as people want to talk about Tampa Bay versus Washington, New Orleans versus Carolina, I think New Orleans is a bit of a fraud on offense. So I got Dallas and the points at -6.5. I think Dallas is going to put some points up, and I don't think New Orleans' offense is quite what it looked like versus Carolina. So Dallas and the points.
Yep. I'll just give a simple agree. I'm taking Dallas and the points there. How about Giants versus the Commanders in Washington? Washington -2.
I like Washington here. Jaden Daniels didn't show much as a passer, but his run threat is evident, and I like Brian Robinson Jr. And I think that Terry McLaurin does a lot more than 2 catches for 17 yards. Bowles came out and said that was actually his number one game plan, not Jaden running. So I don't think the Giants can do that. So Washington with -2, I like them to win by 3 at least.
I'm with you. I'll agree. I'm betting against the Giants all year, and I think Terry McLaurin is a big buy low guy in fantasy. If you can trade for him now,
100%.
I would do it. The
100%.
Rams visiting the Cardinals. Cardinals, 1.5 point favorites. Who you take?
I actually really love that they got Arizona at -1.5 because I would take the Rams outright. So they really impressed me on defense versus Detroit, and even though Puka's out, they don't seem to miss too much of a beat with DeMarcus coming in like the end of last year basically. I like Rams outright on that one.
I'm with you. I think the Rams win that game by. I'd give them 4 points. I haven't watched Arizona struggle against Buffalo, so I'm with you. Let's go
Totally.
on to Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh, 3 point favorites in Denver.
Yeah, I mean the Pittsburgh offense is nothing inspiring, but neither was the Denver offense. Bo struggled a lot more than I think people thought he would. Now keep in mind Seattle corners are very good. I still love Pittsburgh's defense. They won the way I thought they would in Week 1. I think they do the exact same thing here. I think a lot of field goals, maybe a touchdown, but mostly field goals. It's going to be a boring, low-scoring game.
I'm going to go the other way on this one. I'm going to go Denver. I agree. I think Seattle's defense is pretty good. Pittsburgh is not going to win every game by just kicking 5 field goals. I don't trust Justin Fields. And now in fantasy, it's a different story. I like his running. But I will take Denver on that one. And that's the lowest over-under of the week. So I think it is going to be a low-scoring game, but I'll take Denver. We got Kansas City hosting Cincinnati. Kansas City favored by 6. Where are you going?
So, Cincinnati looked awful. I think they're gonna get it together eventually, especially once T. Higgins gets back, but not in Week 2. I got Kansas City and the points at -6. I think they win by 10.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Cincinnati, again, I don't think their quarterback can hold a football right now, and I think Kansas City looks like the best team in the league. Them or the Niners. So, yeah, I'm going to take Kansas City and the points. Sunday Night Football, big game. Chicago versus Houston. Last year's Rookie of the Year versus this year's hopeful Rookie of the Year, Caleb Williams. Can Chicago do anything on offense, or do they just go back to the 2008 Bears and win every game on punt returns and defense?
Getting Montez Sweat last year was one of the underrated pickups, and I have the Bears having one of the most underrated defenses in the league. And they showed that in Week 1. They're an amazing defense. I think they're going to be good. But Houston's got firepower. I still got Houston. C.J. Stroud. I mean, Joe Mixon looked great. I think this is going to be a game where they get out using the receivers, and then Mixon kind of takes over in the second half. 6.5. That's a lot, but I could see Houston. Caleb Williams is clearly going through some rookie struggles, and it would be a lot to ask him to go from 93 yards to a significant jump in Week 2 against an improved Houston defense. So I got Houston and the points here. I think they win by more than 6.5.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Caleb Williams actually he had a horrible week 1. We talked about no round or number 1 overall quarterback has won their opening game in 20 years. He looked awful, but he did keep them in it enough to win it and ran the
Right.
clock down for him all right. Things that don't show up in the stat sheet, but I think Houston is actually a very good team this year, and they're going to outplay them. I'll take them in the points. Last but not least, Monday Night Football, the Falcons going to Philly. Philly favored by 6.5. Do you think Atlanta can get this offense together or no?
No, and I think this has as much to do about matchups as it does about the Falcons being looking so bad in Week 1. the Philly defense, the run defense is really where their strength is at, and Falcons are going to need their run game to be effective to kind of help Kirk get whatever he needs to get going for that passing offense. So Philly, they got the boat racing offense. I just see them getting, I could see this be a potential shellacking, way over 6.5 points. So I'll take a Philly with the points.
I'm with you until I can see that Kirk Cousins can actually stand on the ground and throw, or we bring in Michael Penix. I don't see how Atlanta's going to be able to compete. Philly's too physical on defense, too good on offense. I think that's going to be a blowout, like you said. So that does it for our picks of the week. Hopefully, you lose some and I can win some, so that I can gain ground in this competition.
I don't know if we
Before
disagreed
here,
too much this week.
no,
I
I
don't
know
know if
I
we
didn't give
disagreed too
myself
much this week.
I give myself a lot of room to gain ground, so I don't know if I'm just like riding your coattails. But at least if we lose, we both lose. So
Right.
minimal controversy this week.
Sure.
But before we go, we got a couple quick betting tips. One that I do really like, DeAndre Swift, anytime touchdown, plus 195. I'd hop on that. I think he gets into the end zone this week. Jeff Wilson, anytime touchdown, plus 195. Again, I think he is going to be the Dolphins guy. I think he'll be the Dolphins' number one guy, and especially the goal line guy if Achane and Mostert are out. We're also talking about a team that had one of the best offenses this week. I think they'll come out, and Jeff Wilson's a good a good pick. Also, Jalen Wright at plus 220. He's going to be a big guy for the Dolphins. Anybody that you've got that you'd love to hit on?
This is a high risk, high reward, but at plus 500, Josh Allen, two rushing touchdowns or more. Now, that's a lot to ask of any quarterback, even Josh Allen. But right now, their wide receiver makeup, Keon looks like he's going to be the long-term guy. He even looked like he kind of stepped out ahead a little bit this last week, but it's going to be so in the red zone. It's going to be all Josh Allen right now until they really figure out their identity for their passing offense. And so early on, even though you don't like to chase the week before in bets, early on I could see Josh just carrying this red zone load so much more until they eventually figure it out.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
plus
I think
500,
that's
it's a nice risk.
like you said, it's a high risk, high reward. But he had 2 touchdowns this week, and knowing Josh Allen, he was not going to let a running back score from inside the 5. That's going to be him. So yeah, right. I think that's you can combine 2 or 3 of these and get a nice little parlay going. But I don't think that's a horrible outside the box pick. Nice. So yeah, well, that'll do it for this week on a Winning Play podcast. Thank you guys for joining us. Please make sure to follow us on any socials at Winning Play Pod, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, whatever you like. I'm Drew James, here for Robb Huter. We also have Kendall Caps waiting to step back in next week once he's off the IR. Thank you guys for joining us. Have a great week. Good luck, winners. We'll see you back here next Wednesday.
See you guys.